And don't take too much pity on me. I'm studying how to use loft strands. And I would suggest at the moment you find that there's stresses going on. A lot of people are kind of funny. Are you going to wait till you're crippled until you start using a crutch? Use the crutch way, way, way ahead to conserve. You're demonstrating to people. You know, when a knowledgeable person in the outdoors sees an exceptional piece of wood, they take it and put it out of sight, because that piece of wood looks like firewood, because if you don't, the rest of the group will throw it on the fire thinking it's a piece of firewood. And when I tell people it's not firewood, it's violin wood. You build violins out of that wood. You make musical instruments. It's not firewood because it's so knot-free, straight-grained, and it's got all the properties. I knew a guy, that's what he did for a living, is that he looks for wood, and that wood only grows in northern, so he was in the States somewhere. He had to become a Canadian citizen because he got such a hassle from the authorities bringing the wood to build bass viols. In those days, anything that looks like a violin, and some were very large. And he said that the big bass viol, the biggest violin-looking instrument, that board at the back had to be such that when you sawed it, then opened it, you'd have the reflection of the patterns. At that time, when if he found one of those, he was very every month. But a board like that in those current was $1,500 for that board. To make it, you need a lot of boards to make the bass viols to meet the needs of North America. And we have forms of spruce that have the resonance and so on. Well, the question he asked me, he said, you mentioned something about aspen being a beautiful wood to display feather stick making. Well, you'll learn very quickly that there's a big triangle. In the center of the triangle is the objective. So one point of the triangle is you and what you know. The other point is the tools that you're working with. And your knowledge is connected to the tools. And third is the material. You can have the most beautiful material in the world and you still don't get anywhere because you don't have the right tool and you don't know how to use it. If you have the right knowledge and the right tool and the right material, it's magic. It's a powerful combination of things. And that juggling act is something that continues, or the native people, to do well. They had to understand that. For us, we're too remote to realize that such a condition exists. Well, one big challenge that Dragon Hair will have is that a great deal of your work is continuously displaying your skills at trade shows, at outdoor shows, and so on. And you don't want to make a poor showing. Well, one thing is that you should, be practicing behind the barn for a week or something in anticipation of that trade show. And when the trade show is finished, people will think that you're an utter magician because you've repeated everything so often that it becomes so smooth and so effective in so few strokes and everything like that. Well, one of them is displaying to people the property of how a good knife would take off shavings. You can't just use any old piece of wood. You have to have a lot of judgment into that. And if you take an aspen, well, you could probably any aspen, but what you're concerned about is how straight it is and how few branches it is. All these trees here are aspens. And if you get one in particular where they grow densely to begin with, they often don't have branches for quite a distance. And then you'll find you have knot-free wood. And so one way is to peel the tree as it stands and let it stand for many years. And it'll cure on the stump. The other way that's faster is to cut down the tree, cut it into manageable pieces. And generally my impression is it's the time of year when the bark peels off really easily, which is somewhere from mid-May to mid-July. And if you're a serious carver, like you are in Saint-Maurice, Quebec, and so on, because that's their favorite wood for carving. Some people carve in birch, but that's another story. They will take a chainsaw in many cases and run it to the center of the tree because the tree will check in places and sort of ruin or waste the wood where you don't want it. So by making that cut to the heart, whatever expansion and contraction will occur there, and you've got solid wood throughout, and you get a lot of return for your effort. Well, when you got a piece of that wood, you're in a position to do spectacular work, which would mean that standing up and doing the stroke from as high as you can reach with your hand like this down to almost near the ground, you should get 20 curls to prove to yourself and everybody else of your skill development and the quality of the edge of your knife and the quality of the materials you're using. And the magic is not created by happenstance and some good fairies whacking on the head. It happens through a lot of experience. And I'm saying this so long here is I'm saying you this is what the issue is in the forest to be successful like your ancestors were. And much of that knowledge is not written down in encyclopedias. But by the time you were able to stand up from crawling, down that mic here, that you already were well on your way to developing the parts of your brain that would cause you to you know, be skilled at what you do. That's the sort of thing, and we are at a great disadvantage. Anyway, aspen, this tree here might be a meal because you might peel the bark in the spring, and there's a kind of a juicy surface. You scrape that. That was the sweetest stuff the native people have. That's available to you. Usually, almost everything is usually only available to you unless it's a root. 3 weeks out of the year. So you got to go from one 3-week thing to another 3-week thing throughout the year to fill your stomach. And when you can find aspens, for example, this big. If I peel that bark, look what I got. There's the size of the bark. One aspen peeled as high as I can reach is giving me the root a rainproof shelter during the rainy season. And you can't peel the bark any other time, but during the spring from mid-May to maybe mid-July, you're going to do that. The same applies to the birch trees that you will see here, that everything peels readily because the new cambium layer, the annual ring is being laid down, and on, and so you get those sort of problems. Now, if Dragon hadn't asked that question, we would have stood here so long.
Selfishly, I'll ask a few more questions.
Now, the situation, this is called the hoof fungus. It's called the false teaser. He's one of the ones there a little bit. And here you got, if I cut this, you will see that not much of the fungus is this brown stuff. The brown stuff is called amadou. When you dry it, it's one of the most absorbent materials you're ever going to find. Dentists used to use it to wipe out the cavity after they drilled out all the rotten stuff, and then they fill. I don't know what they use now. And there are trout fishermen would get a piece maybe 4 inches by 4 inches, and you can buy it from the catalog for 30 bucks, and you put your flies and squeeze them to dry. There's some process in trout fishing where you want to blot out all the moisture, etc. So there'll be a small book about all the things that and this fungus is rather small. And if you wander around enough, you'd have hug-sized fungi now and again. And if that tree develops a hug-sized fungus and falls down, it'll even be bigger. And pass that around so people can look, grab that and pass, look at it, pass it. Feel the bottom to see there. You look at this, and if I cut through the fungus at a certain point, no matter how deep it is, and I hold it to the sun will shine through those tubes to prove that there are tubes. And here I have the little pieces. And when you get this big fungus, it's a way of extracting the whole total piece. You're not slicing it out with your knife. And then you tease it and you tease it, and it's big enough to make hats, big enough to make vests.
I clean my eyeglasses.
So you got, that would be a particularly good use for this material. Or you could saturate it with a medicine and bind it on, or whatever. Or you can boil it. Now you might get away, you test it and say just boiling, because without boiling this won't grab a spark. When you hit a rock with a chunk of metal, a little spark, they'll land on this. And commercially, before matches were invented, there were people who made their livelihoods gathering this stuff in large quantities for lighting fire. And so it's called a tinder. And tinder is a material, when a tiny spark lands on it, it begins to glow. Don't call a handful of grass tinder. You cannot set fire to a handful of grass with a tiny spark. And if it doesn't work by boiling it, your next step is take the ashes, especially the ashes from aspen. The ashes from aspen. Oh, well, look at that. The ashes from aspen seem to be the closest substitute to baking powder when you're trying to make bannock and you run out of baking powder. Anyway, so you got these many uses, and to us, it's fire lighting. False tinder fungus, because you've got to boil it. You can't use it natural. This is called true tinder fungus because you do not need any processing outside of putting it in your pocket to dry it out. Now, if you want to peel it, pass it around. If I was really in one of our courses, you'd all get a piece enough to tease it, to peel it for yourself. If you boil that in saltpeter, it could explode in your pocket. There's a tiny, a spark off of a sewing needle that's flicked across the back of a teacup would be enough to ignite that. And that saltpeter is so catchy that you better be careful. You probably would get into trouble taking on an airplane flying from here elsewhere. So that's called a false tinder fungus. It's written up in Bushcraft. Here we have a fungus. The true tinder, the tree must be dead. False tinder, false tinder must be dead. If the tree isn't dead, the fungus won't be there. And someone asked about mosquito. If you got a dry piece, you light it. And if there was mosquito country right now, Bev would be holding that fungus. It'd be hardly a mosquito. And you're in camp and you're concerned that bears will give you a problem because you're cooking too much bacon. They absolutely hate the smell of that fungus. They dislike it. They dislike it probably as much as they dislike paradichlorobenzene, which is mothballs. Anyway, so here we have a fungus. Now this one is on a scale of 1 to 10. This is probably 2. If it was 10, it would be almost, except for a little layer on here, it'd be very corky and it would be very expensive. If it was on the scale of 10, something like that, probably worth $100 to the herbalist who are trying to cure your stomach cancer, sort of thing. But here is something that is so slowly oxidizing, turning to carbon, so slowly, there is no flame. That's how exquisitely ignitable it is. And it's renowned for that purpose in that you do not require any other processing except the fact that if it's moist off the tree, and you get some, and it's kind of consistent, and when you try to depress it, it acts like cork, like fresh wine bottle cork. Now this is still usable, but for making tea. Because next to Lipton, next to commercial teas, the native people would, and they wouldn't use the good stuff, they'd use the horrible rated, number 1 level, number 2 level stuff for tea. And if you want to go into color therapy, you boil this, put it in a clear glass bottle and stand it in the sun, and the sun shines through that ruby color. And that ruby color is so ruby that I think it stimulates endorphins in your brain. It creates a kind of an effect that color has creates effect. Chaga is the old world name, and it's I charge extra for the Latin. So save time, I don't bring up too much Latin. Any questions on anything I said so far? Have I missed anything? Sometimes I miss really pertinent things. You don't carry fire with that. If you got the big lump and you strike the spark, putting it on water, it's going to sit underwater for an hour before that spark is out. You're wasting a very precious substance. You take a little bit of it and light it. You don't light it as part of the big one, but not that.
I've dropped a spark on a chunk like this on a windy day, and before you know it, your hand's on fire on the other side. Like there's no recovering.
And it's so pleasant to breathe in that smoke that people that have to take medications for their lungs, they crumble that, because many medications will not hold an ember in the pipe. Oh, yeah, she's got a little bit in her kit, perfect. It's corky, it's light, it's fluffy. That's exquisitely catchable in the spark, and that
You gave me this.
yeah, you can actually eat it. They said that Utsi, that 4,500 or 4,700-year-old preserved guy up in the Alps or whatever, he had a piece of it on him, and it is, they say, that it's quite an antibiotic. I have no idea how the antibiotic property is exploited, but this is called a razor strap fungus, or it's called Pictoporus botulinus. And it has the property, when you get a large fungus, apparently, that you can strop your razor, and it's good for that. That's why they call that. Stropping, you sharpen everything, as you're already aware, as sharp as you can. To reach a stage of sharpening to shave with, you have to have stropping come into play. Now in medieval Europe, they had Amadou, which we've shown you. They also had Pictoporus. And they would have an airtight tin, and customs would have instructed you on how big the hole should be in the lid of the tin. you lit a little part of the fungus and put it in a tin, and if the fungus that went out, your hole wasn't big enough. If the fungus would have burned up really quickly, your hole is too big. So the basic thing is you got it just right, and you took it with you. It was like a hand warmer to a certain extent, and when you put that fungus in there, if all I know, it would burn a month. You want to light a fire? Open the tin, hold the fungus against your kindling, blow in the flame, put the fungus back into the tin, put it back in the pot. And that's cryptoporous. And you'll notice that it won't grow in a live tree. It's important to know whether they want to grow in dead or alive trees. And there are probably other uses, but this says herbaceous dogwood, which is known as the happy plant. So when the Canadian scientists studying cancer kept running across the statement that the Iroquois always used it for people who had cancer, he wondered why, and he tested it, and he said that there's no known plant, and as far as he knew, that could stimulate endorphins in the human body like bunchberry does. Well, I knew something about endorphins. Endorphins, if you laugh a lot, you stimulate endorphins. There's a feeling about you. You can't be sad and muggy and everything if you're laughing. If you're glum, you're destroying endorphins. If you're cursing and everything, the endorphins are compromised. They have to be used to counteract the damage done by the mental meanness you're experiencing. Well, with bunchberry, you take a pot, whatever you got, fill it full of the plant. The roots aren't involved as far as I know. The berries, you can eat them, but they're a very good cure for constipation unless you roast them, because they have a slimy little center in there that helps the dry condition in the intestine that is causing the build-up and lumpy constipation and whatever, and so on. So you pour enough water to cover it. If it's green, simmer it. If you're going to take it home and dry it, steep it like tea. But I suspect that when you take it home and dry it, it has a different action. It's changed, and that action goes in favor of the bulimic. So if you have bulimia, you drink that tea and you develop unbelievable appetite, hunger. So then whether you like it or not, you're going to eat because it's instigated so strong. And in particular, in the winter, when you get the plants from under the snow, they often turn a purple color, get all wrinkly. When you make a tea out of that, boy, I'll tell you, it's phenomenal when you're a normal person. How all I can think of is get home as quickly as possible, and I hope there's some rye bread and garlic sausage in the deep freeze because I'm going to eat a whole loaf of rye bread and a whole ring of garlic sausage. That's silly because I'm that hungry because of that. But anyway, when I go on a survival course, and I know we don't have groceries, and the mosquitoes are annoying, and you're sleeping without sleeping bags, and on, you make that tea, and you're a blip. You're happy, and you're not preoccupied with all your misery. Now, when you have cancer, you're preoccupied with some serious misery, and that is a problem, the mental problem. Well, there was a Spaniard, I forget his name. He was most renowned at that time, 40, 50 years ago, as the authority on cancer in the world. And he said that cancer was very rare under normal circumstances. Of course, you can walk into Chernobyl and get cancer just from that. He said, but in normal situation, cancer was very rare, he said, to people who laugh a lot. The next thing he said, cancer was very rare if the husband and wife had true love. And I always suspect that when you see a wife come down with cancer, or the husband come down with cancer, that marriage had a lot to do with that cancer. You might be annoyed or shocked or whatever, but that's the fact that he brought that out in his studies. Where there was true love, he says cancer was rare. So when it's sour between two people, there's nothing better on the face of the earth than to create a constant situation of constant internal sourness and bitterness and everything else that occurs there. And then you get cancer from that because you've compromised your immune response. Boy, listen to Dr. Kolchanski talk. Is he credible? Well, anyway. Now, but here is the problem. Just like in life and everything, many good things have, what do you call people? Imposters. Many good things have imposters. And the imposters are usually have an agenda that is definitely dangerous to you, compromise you. The imposter is being an imposter because they're going to get something to their benefit at your lack of benefit. And that is, this plant imitates a plant that's very poisonous. And you got to be able to tell the difference. And the difference is easily, and it saved my ass in Sweden. Because there was lots, I said, oh, you guys got bunchberry too. Oh, yes. And I said, well, here's the test. For bunchberry, just have something to say. In the dogwood family, and strawberries share this too, there's latex in the veins. And when you take and carefully break the leaf, very carefully break the leaf, you can actually have a breeze indicator in that the latex will stretch, but the leaf still, there's a discontinuity, but the latex is stretched and it's still hanging on. If it doesn't do that, it's not dogwood. Well, here's another dogwood, right here. Red osier dogwood. This isn't herbaceous. And when you do the same thing, it's the same test. But in many, this imposter, I said after a while, after about the third or fourth time, I said, this is not bunchberry. Because I was taught, that the test, you better have faith in the test. And it turned out that later, and I said, what is this? Then I saw this blue stalk with a blueberry come up. It was in British Columbia. And they said, oh, don't eat that berry. Not one berry might even kill you. And whatever. So anyway, you got the situation there.
Yeah, hold the Ziploc underneath. You know what? For years, not years, you know, the nice thing is chaga presents itself after years of searching. It's like the gods just say, okay, you've looked long enough, and they always open the door for you. Because I just look to my right, and there's another massive chunk, again, which I'll take.
Did you not get it?
All right. Well, do you see?
Just give him. Looks like him to stand underneath.
So just digging underneath it, and should just pop it open. See that one there you're looking at? Look at that beast.
Yeah, but it's really flat. It's not very.
Yeah, this is almost.
Oh.
It's not sticking out.
It's concave rather than.
You guys don't know. You guys don't know what's good for you. What's going on there? All right, I'm done.
I feel like you were cheating.
You need a stump or something to stand on.
You shimmy up.
Were you getting closer?
You get a little bit of the root, but he's knowledgeable enough to go for the root for me. The situation, it's called Aurelia nudicalis, which is actually simpler than the common name, which is, what is the common name?
Bristly sarsaparilla.
Sarsaparilla. Sarsaparilla. Now, sarsaparilla is extremely common. The Iroquois say that they don't worry about rations because they know that they can, if they're hungry, they're going to be able to take care of their hunger through the use of these roots. Now you can see this root is thin. If you could dig further, you might encounter a much thicker root. And a lot of people sort of say, it's not my plant. They don't know how to skin it. In order to remove the skin off the roots, which is a very detectable energizer. If you're lagging and tired and pooped and so on, you're going to want to chew on this root. Now, first, I'll make myself a strong tea of, and not strong, but a good tea of bunchberry. Then I start looking for this root. And to remove the bark, you pound it. And that really you can't peel it. It won't peel very much. And it's a flavor that was, and maybe still is, part of some root beer recipes. The berries look edible, and to a certain extent they are. There'll come another stalk, and they'll be blue. If you wander around here, you'll see that big cluster, and they're sweet enough. And we were on a walk, and we had a big patch, and it was the time for that patch to have its berries. And people say, is that edible? And I said, sure. I have never read anything contrary to that in all my literature. And everybody ate berries, and then about a half hour later, they're all looking at me and wondering whether they should kill me or whether they are all going to die, because their throats began to burn very, very seriously. And I didn't know that. The literature didn't say that, though. Anyway, years later, I mentioned it, and somebody in the audience, Oh, you don't you know that those seeds have these little hooks, and when you swallow them, they rake the living daylights out of your throat. They're not poisonous. You just rake the living daylights out of your throat. Well, there it was. It was not a poison. It was just an irritation mechanically. I would put this in the top 10 of the more useful plants. And there are other medicinal uses for it. But the root, you would have probably not been hungry here for a week at least by harvesting it, because it's been here all the way along. But I just didn't mention it, but I had to mention it here. Wild sarsaparilla, the only member of its, in North America, I don't think there's very many, any. And when we say sarsaparilla, that's a related plant. This is sarsaparilla. And sarsaparilla was common as a flavoring for in the bars when you wanted to not drink alcoholic beverage or you wanted to mix. They would brew up that, and that's called sarsaparilla. But this is sarsaparilla, which is different.
Did you say to pound the root?
Yeah, just tap that with your knife handle against a tree.
There's a story.
And you want to tap it first, and then it comes off and get quiet, scraping it like that. You'll have to live twice as long to be able to scrape enough. So when you tap it, it loosens. It comes off easy.
Oh, so there's
Put
like
it between the
bark,
tree.
another inner bark?
Oh yeah, there's a hard woody core. And so by tapping it, it just unravels. And you tap it, and you tap it all along length, and then you see how, when it does that, then you gather large amounts very quickly. Just the fact that people try to peel it and can't, because they don't know that little thing of tapping, they give up on it. Humans have a kind of a propensity to leave out one thing, and then that defies their ability to get the plant.
There's a story about that plant and some native fella somewhere outrunning a cavalry that was chasing him because he just lived on that, and he had endurance beyond belief, and they couldn't catch up to him or keep up to him because he just kept eating that and just going and going and going.
Yeah, I don't think, outside of scratching your throat, I don't think you can harm it. And when you start playing with it, you'll be impressed. Yeah, I go on these walks. After a walk, I come home, and I'm using bunchberry tea for a few weeks after I've come home. I'm using that because I taper off, and then time, you're busy and everything. Well, Al Wardale, you want to talk to someone who takes a bit of rat root every day, you talk to him and he'll tell you what the consequences are. And with great interest, I hope I long enough to see him to old age, to see how healthy he has been. And it seems to have a very positive effect as far as his health is concerned, or at least he thinks his mind is doing it, but that's, the placebo effect. But a lot of these things, they're remarkable things that if you're concerned about, you're not going to get that in the grocery store. You're not going to get that in the pharmacy. Your reward for the study of the wild, edible, useful, medicinal, magical plants is going to be what you derive personally from them with regard to improving your health or improving your ability to sleep. And it's all there. And it's a hobby, and it's not expensive outside of you having the gas to drive to an area that's wild. Sort of, but people just don't indulge in it. Well, you guys go on ahead because I got to drink this. I can't walk with my crutches and drink at the same time. I'll be hungry.